Welcome to the Luna Holistic Podcast. I'm your host, Geneva Robbins, and every month on this podcast, we'll talk about Reiki, as well as answering your questions on all things spiritual. We are gratefully located in Calgary in Treaty 7 territory. Thank you all and welcome to the show. Hello, my name's Geneva Robbins, and this is the Luna Holistic Podcast. Today I have Rita Reddy here with me. Say hi, Rita.
Hello.
Good to have you. Today we're going to talk about what do you do about a creative block. But I love how you phrased it before we got on, because you said it's a creative slumber, which I even love all of that just to start off with. I think that's an empowering turn of phrase, which is creative in itself. And so I'm excited to dig into that with you today.
Okay, me too.
Yay. We always start with a collective breath of gratitude, a little mini meditation. So if you are listening and you're driving, don't close your eyes. Keep your eyes open. Maybe skip forward. And if you have a few minutes and you are in a safe place to close your eyes, I invite you to close your eyes briefly and just take a big sigh of relief. Just letting all of the day go. No matter how busy it's been or what's happened, just know that the earth is supporting you directly below your feet. Gravity has always got you. Noticing the earth and that magnificent healing energy deep within the land. And just sending a thought of gratitude deep into the earth for all of the plants and animals and the fresh air and water and all of the beings that make up a part of your experience. Really sending out a wave of gratitude for all of that good that we get blessed with every single moment. And then feel that wave of gratitude reflect and rebound, filling you up with clarity and hopefulness and that big wave of inspiration. All is well. Wonderful. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes. Nice. A little quick dip in the gratitude pond. How did that go for you, Rita?
Oh, it was nice. It's always nice to center yourself.
Yeah. Lovely. Amazing. So I love this phrase you used, creative slumber. I'm curious where that came about for you. Because most of the time when people talk about, they feel stuck in their creativity, they talk about it as a block, which is this it can be quite a weighty psychological and emotional thing to feel stuck when you are a creative person and you have these outlets that you love. What inspired you to call it a creative slumber? Which I find fascinating, by the way.
Yes, I think I called it a creative slumber because that's what it feels like a sleep. And because the season's changing and it's autumn and it's getting colder, like winter. So I was thinking about, the apple tree cycle and the cycle of things dying or going to sleep, having a winter. Just creativity can kind of do the same thing. And it doesn't have to be winter, but for me right now, I think it's it's happening and coinciding with autumn and winter. So yeah, that's why I called it a slumber. Although my slumber has been happening for quite a long stretch here. So it's been over the summer and over the spring as well. I don't think that creativity is blocked. Like I still feel like the flow of ideas and all of these things, but I just have this it's almost like I'm dreaming them and sleeping while thinking of all of these ideas and not like stepping into action or waking up yet.
Yeah. I like that idea that it's like, what if it's not stuck? It's just only sleeping, which is such a healing way of approaching it. And then even just viewing it as part of a cycle as well. Instead of often we think of creativity or projects as being very linear. They've got a start, a middle, and an end. And and that, we have to that they go in one direction only. But I find creativity is like loops and spirals, and it is very much a cyclical thing. I like this idea that it's like, it's not blocked, it's not stuck, it's just sleeping. Because that's all feels very hopeful. There's this energy of movement there. And that's like, just like anything that's sleeping, there's a reason for that sleep. There's a reason for the slumber. I kind of
Hmm.
come back to this idea of energy that, why do we just physically sleep is because we need the rest, and we also need that dreaming time, right? And it's kind of an interesting thing that you're like, you probably are in need of a lot of rest and you're also dreaming things, but it's not yet time. I love the apple tree cycle as well. Maybe it's not yet time to start planting those seeds. You don't want to start planting seeds while it's still winter or
Yeah,
creatively in your winter season. They won't grow.
right.
Or you could
Yeah, like
or you could put so much effort to making them grow that it's a push
yeah.
pulling.
Yeah, and if you rush things, then they're not going to grow correctly and they're not going to grow into what you want necessarily. And you need like the right timing and the right season, the right condition.
The right conditions.
Yeah.
I think of it as too, is like if you look at it as a cycle or a seasonal cycle, like that you're sleeping during the winter, and the purpose of that time is to dream and to come up with, just idea gather. Then instead of, working against the seasons, you're working with the seasons. I think in our last podcast, we were talking about the change of seasons and how do you handle and cope with change and what autumn brings, both in terms of the change of busyness, because often there's a lot of energy going to those kinds of things. But this idea of like your creativity has seasons, and then you're working within that natural cycle because all winters eventually end. All slumbers end with you waking up and getting to work, you know, but not rushing it, I think is also an interesting thing too.
Yeah, and it's more like a fluid thing. Whereas like if you think of something as a block, a physical block is like a big square that's like kind of immovable and it's stuck and like heavy and there's no give there. Whereas a sleep or a slumber or a lull even is like just kind of still flowing and still part of like a cycle that continues and like you will you like any sleep you'll the idea is to wake up and there's this idea of hope and like a continuation.
Yeah. So, what are some of the things that you've been dreaming up that might move you forward in this creative slumber?
Oh, well, a lot of my creativity right now has to do with my home, I guess, and like reorganizing things inside my home, creating like efficiencies in my life in general, kind of just like planning that and when you're sitting in your space that you want to recreate, you kind of have to imagine what it looks like because there's like obstacles like money and like time
Yes.
and things and like other things that need to be removed before you can make space for new things. So like sitting in the space and like kind of incubating an idea and several ideas, that's kind of what I've been doing. And also in general, like I haven't done any painting or drawing in a very long time or writing. And so writing is an easy one, I think, because you don't need a lot of materials. You just need a pen or
Yes.
a computer. Um, and yeah, like I find actually lately I've been doing a lot of like 5-minute meditations and then writing right after. And it's so quick. It's so easy. And like I'll force myself to do it. Like I'll find myself scrolling social media or watching TV, and then all of a sudden I'll just stop because I know that that 5 minutes um that I set a timer and just like center myself, just as we did at kind of at the beginning of this podcast. Just by doing that, it's so powerful because it's instant. It's like you instantly know like what you want to do. And 5 minutes is so accessible, especially when you're in the middle of watching TV or just
Yeah.
sitting anyway.
No, you have it in that
Yeah,
moment.
you know you have it.
I love that too because it's like it's powerful to have an awareness that you're in an avoiding moment. Like, it's like and being gentle around it. Being gentle of like just make it really small. I think when what can happen for people is that the slumbers turn into blocks when we push and pull, when we put a lot of angst or there's a lot of shame built up. It's like, I have all these projects and I have all this, time I'm wasting and then it just builds and builds and builds. And then you've got, you know, this sort of energetic and emotional clutter between you and your creative work. And you have to climb shame mountain to get to your writing desk, to get to, the things. And if you can flatten that hill with a just tiny little meditation, just a 5-minute burst, just setting your timer, breathing slowly, you can do some bit of gratitude and then just following up with a little 5-minute writing. I love that. It's really, for me, it's really transformational because it gets things moving and it can loosen you up, especially when you feel like you've got that time crunch and you just can't get to the work because of all of the other things that you're juggling. Probably the reason for the creative slumber is that you're putting all of your creative energy elsewhere, right? And there are times and seasons where it's got to go to that because life is demanding and full and always in a state of flux.
Hmm.
I love that. That's
Well, I was
fantastic.
just thinking too, like it's also very helpful to have kids because
Mhm.
kids are always creating and like imagining and playing and like just and they have all these materials already out all the time and they're like um yeah, like
And they're
mom, like draw with
fearless.
me.
And they're
Yeah, they're
fearless.
fearless. Yeah, anything goes, like any surface, any any,
Yeah.
any ideas, like let's just run with it. In recycling, like
There's curiosity. Yeah.
take stuff that's colorful or interesting or, even pictures from flyers and like random stuff. And they'll just be like, look, I'm going to make a unicorn. I'm going to make Christmas card. I don't know. Just endless.
Yes. And I think letting ourselves play like children with it is a really big thing. Like, I think there can be what can get people stuck. I know for me is like, oh, I want to make this thing, but I want to make it good. And I want my peers to approve of me. And I want my mentors to say that I did a good job and give me an A. And I think this kind of gets drilled into us through like schooling and academics. It's like, I want to do the thing, but only if I'm great at it instantly and it meets my vision. And there's not that element of playfulness and fun. And if we approach our creative work in a way that pulls all the joy out of it, then it's hard to get back to it when there are so many other things to do, like laundry and chores and running kids to events and all of it. There's a million and one things and juicy distractions right at our fingertips with our phones. And then on top of it, then it's like, oh, it's been so long, and so sometimes people will like go, I'll just bin it, oh, I won't do that thing. But I find the beautiful thing about great ideas is that they will tag along like a little puppy dog. Like they will find you, they will wait till you're dreaming, and then they'll go pounce. Like, here's your idea again. So you can try to run away from these creative dreams and visions, but they're not going anywhere. So you might as well just give in and
That's so
do things that
true.
can calm you, do things that inspire you, that put you in that place of inspiration. I think that's a big piece too. I think children are naturally inspiring that way, especially young kids. They're really like willing to try and willing to make attempts, and they're not too concerned about the outcome, which is like a beautiful, beautiful like time in life. And if we can give ourselves that same grace, and I really like putting two ideas that shouldn't go together, taking two random concepts and like even just like random words, putting them together. And it's like, can you write a thing about these two things that don't normally belong together? That I think, as well as like things that sort of push you to think differently. I also love what you mentioned before about clearing and reorganizing your creative space, or you just do like your workspace, your life space. I've recently done this too. I think the fall sort of brings this like, the leaves are shedding off the trees right now. So it's like, well, I'm going to clear things off of my writing desk. And I got rid of an old computer we never use. It was like, it's going to a better home. And, I shredded a whole pile of paperwork that was just sitting there, just there's a lot of things that have just been like, I don't need them anymore. Like they've served their purpose and now they can move on to better places. And just that simple thing has like unleashed, like it's so much easier now, so sometimes it's like just even clearing the physical environment and giving it a little freshen up. Or I think also of like working in other mediums that aren't your primary medium, so if you're a painter, like playing with Play-Doh, like going to the dollar store and buying a bunch of glue and popsicle sticks and making a log fort, or
Right.
something.
Totally.
It's like
Yes.
make a little creative workshop, or for me, I'm learning piano, and that's not something that I'm planning on really bringing, but it's really joyful. and it takes me out of my normal mode of creativity and puts me into a place of learning, dabbling around, just plinky plonking. And I just have the whole experience be light, you know. Yeah. How does that fit with you?
Lovely. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, my neighbor is a music teacher and she gave Hazel, my daughter, a ukulele, which, nobody had really considered playing. And she'll create like a little fort, with a blanket and like go sit inside of it and like start playing the ukulele. And like, I think it's so interesting that she does it that way because she kind of creates a creative space and then she just tries it out and she doesn't know what she's doing. And like, we haven't talked about lessons or anything yet, but like, yeah, she just wants to like try. And then she even starts singing little words to it. And like, it's really cute.
I also love that urge. I'm like, that urge to incubate your creativity in a sacred and safe place where you can practice and play and not have it be perfect, just figuring it out.
Yeah, you're not being watched by anyone and or observed or and you're not really like doing it for anything. You're just trying it out. And that's the other thing that when we're talking about kids, it's the process that they love. Like even if there's like a tie-dye kit or whatever, like they love to like get out the materials and look at them and like talk about like what they do and what each thing is for. Like there's like the colors and then there's like the fixative and like all these different little aspects. And yeah, like each little step is also interesting all by itself. And like you can play with the ideas. And when you're in your like creative slumber, you can like just think about materials and like what do they do and play around with things.
What is paint? And what
Yeah.
makes red paint red and white paint white?
Yeah.
And how did they make paint? What's the history of paint? How long has paint been around? Like, do a deep dive on Wikipedia.
Yeah, totally. You can like read a book about it, or you can, yeah, totally like just Google stuff and just to know like what's the fundamentals of things or what are things made out of that we can use. And then, I think in that way too, new ideas can form about like what color is. I mean, if you think about red paint coming from like crushed beetles or beet juice or like, all kinds of places like crushed rocks and you can make different shades of red and different shades of anything and that in itself is like a new it's inspiring and you can come up with other places where red comes from or other ways to like you can just like invent new things in just thinking about the fundamentals of things.
The fundamentals. Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And I also love that creativity and going back into the sort of exploration that's going to spark curiosity. Because I think curiosity can move us through and past a lot of our fears and can help us enter that playful realm. One of the things is like going to sources of inspiration. So, other, watching videos and things of other creators at work is pretty great. And sometimes going outside of your primary field, I find is really good because then you bypass the whole inner critic of like if you are a painter, say, and you watch other people painting, you're like, well, I'm not good about I can't do it that way. It's like so if you go to like instead watching somebody like do music or writing or something else, then you're like, well, I'm not competitive with them. So I can just appreciate their artistry without having to like get my ego sticky fingers in there. I can just
Yes,
appreciate it for
totally.
what it is. There's a couple of things that I like that sparked as you were sharing. So one is the ukulele. I love doing these little like saying yes to the little random invites from the universe. And we had found online a recital for this person's master requirements for their master's in music. And he had taken medieval music and was playing it on a ukulele. So he did his whole recital on the ukulele. So it was like, do you want to go to a medieval ukulele recital for this person's degree requirements? I was like, heck yes, I do. So that's a real thing. We'll put the link to that in because that person is brilliant, brilliant, like artist. The other thing was, I think, a universal like blanket forts are, I think we cracked the code of how to get out of a creative slumber, which is blanket forts, like, or a proverbial blanket fort, which is like make it cozy and make it fun and just give yourself a little bit of space to let these seeds of ideas come in. I think that's all really beautiful.
Like a studio or like something as simple as like a craft table
A
or like a
craft
spot.
table,
Yeah.
clearing a little sacred corner of sacred space where you are allowed to play, where nothing that happens in that space has to be productive or meet anybody's approval, including your own. Everything you make in that space is just for fun. You know? I love that. And then there's another inspiring thing on, I believe it's like a CBC documentary about an ink maker. He's from Canada and he makes all of these different kinds of inks from just stuff he finds in the world. And he'll just make a little piece of rust that's crumbled off of a bridge or something into ink. And there's a documentary of like what ink is and how he makes it, and then the different artists that work with it. And it's like, I saw that and I was fascinated. And it was really, really inspiring to just like be playful with it.
Yeah. If you're finding like a rusted piece of metal on the side of the road and like you're never going to be able to recreate probably that bottle of ink, whoever writes with it or creates with that bottle of ink is like the most unique thing.
Yeah. And I think with all of the, fears around AI generating things and everything like that, I think there's a real thirst for genuine, for artistry,
Originality,
for
yeah.
originality, something that's like come from your own gritty, real, lived, raw existence. And that is the place where for me I get a lot of inspiration is when I see people going into spaces that are vulnerable yet real, and I connect with them in those spaces and I connect with that work, whatever it happens to be, because they're willing to do something different. They're willing to put themselves out there and try something and see if it works. And I appreciate that when I see it. And so I try to allow myself that same like tender, vulnerable space when I do my work because I want there to be that same grace. So I'm willing to try things. I'm willing to put things out, even though my inner critic will say, you're not a that. You can't do that. You don't have a label that says you can do that thing, but you don't have no permission to start doing this kind of work. I politely listen and I politely disagree. And I just start doing things. I love that you said that you write because I really, really, really love the book, The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. It's a classic, classic manuscript on basically journaling prompts. And no matter what kind of creative field you're in, even if you just want to get perspective on your life and what's happening, there's two processes that she recommends. And one is morning pages, so writing 3 longhand pages every morning. And the other is artist dates. So you go somewhere, and artist dates are just for you, and you go somewhere that inspires you, that gives you this sort of insight, places where you can kind of connect to creativity, and they don't have to cost a lot. They don't have to be much time, but you do one artist date every week, and then you do these writing pages every day. And Elizabeth Gilbert, through doing this process with Julia Cameron's work, she discovered that she wanted to learn Italian, go to an ashram in India, and go and learn from a medicine man in Bali. And so without doing this, she wouldn't have created Eat, Pray, Love. So, so sometimes it helps you, even if your slumber is so deep that you're not even dreaming, you're not even getting the ideas. Sometimes this is a process that generates ideas. And I've been working with that process for about a year now. I'm still halfway through the book, so I can tell you where I slumbered a little bit as I was doing it. But I've been finding it invaluable in getting more work out into the world and publishing more meditations and getting more different kinds of sessions out for people. So I've been really, really loving it, and I highly recommend it. It's so simple, but it's so powerful. And then she has some really wonderful, if you're not sure what to write about, she has some wonderful writing prompts in that book that can get you moving with things. Because I think there's a bit of also just keep showing up, even if nothing seems to happen, even if you're only just sat down in your chair, picked up your pen, put it down, went to bed. That's fine. The more times you arrive, the more times there's an opportunity for the thing to happen.
Yeah, like those 5-minute meditations I was talking about, I started out with doing 60 seconds. And then I actually did the timer for 60 seconds, but then I realized that I wanted more of the sitting. And so I set the timer for more. I think the button said resume or repeat or something like that on my timer. And so I just kept hitting repeat until it felt like I had sat for a good amount of time. And then I started doing 5 minutes because I was like, 5 minutes felt like a good amount of time to sit before the writing came. And so sitting with the pen, I love that. Like just sit with the pen and then put it away if you need to.
Yeah,
And
just get
try
yourself
again.
there. Just do a little dab, you know,
Yeah.
just paint one little square inch. You don't have to do the whole painting. Do a little smudge.
It's also a good reason to like go shopping for materials.
Yes. And that's a beautiful, like, artist date thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Like the dollar store or a really nice art store. Like if you know what you like or if you know what you want, then you can just, yeah, buy a nice new book or a nice new pen or whatever.
Yeah. Having new ones are great. And then also like mining your stash, because that's the other thing is like going in and just touching everything. Because I think our hands, we do Reiki here, so we're really aware of energy, right? And things hold the energy. I find when I'm clearing things and clearing spaces and houses and things like that, is that the energy of whatever you were feeling when you put that thing down, that same energy is there when you pick it back up. And I think that can sometimes be why we don't come back to it, because you might have had having some strong feelings the last time you touched those things.
Totally.
And then you have to wade through that emotional soup. And just by picking up a brush. So sometimes having new materials is good because then you don't have to wade through the emotional soup. But sometimes going into that energy can be really instructive because then you can write about it and understand and reflect. And then your art can be a processing of whatever those feelings were in there. And it can be on the harsh side where there could be a lot of pain that's there, but it could also be on the really positive side, is like just touching it reconnects you to the love of the materials, of the process.
Yeah, and like several things come to mind, like when talking about this kind of stuff. Like one was like I read a thing that said, if you haven't touched it in 10 years or whatever, you bought all these materials, just sell them or throw them away or, like give them away. And that made me so sad because I am a person who buys all the things and then keeps them in a box forever
Mm-hmm.
and ever. But I eventually pick them up and I do use them. And that energy that was in there, like maybe it's not the exact right time to like cultivate your whole idea or like create your entire painting, but it's still there. Like it's sleeping and it's the slumber of that idea is it has so much potential and so much, like you said, emotions tied to it and all of these, like the energy of that time that you wanted to to create this thing or do this thing or when you had an idea but you might not have like honed all the skills yet or like quite developed the material that you want to use, like you don't know how to use it yet. And eventually, if if like sometimes, yes, like ideas can be thrown away and they can be a one-off and you probably maybe you'll never make that quilt,
Yeah.
but sometimes there is like a magic in awakening the sleeping project that you once had so much interest in and so much love for. And like, I mean, some of my favorite authors will write a novel for over 40 years, like a span of 20 to 40 years. And like, they'll say, like I went to hear John Irving speak about some of his books, and he's just like, yeah, like a lot of these books I started 20 years ago. And then the ideas keep coming, I keep piecing them together,
Isn't
and
that a
then they
relief?
become, yeah, yeah, it is because then you don't feel like, your novel that's like brewing deep in your soul is like, it's asleep, really, and it's gonna come, and you just have to keep on dreaming it and thinking about it, and then, dabbling in it every now and then, and eventually you'll awaken each idea that you have when you're ready.
You're ready. Yeah, I love it. I love it. I also heard that Leonardo da Vinci, I think it was one of his paintings of the Madonna and Child. It took him 25 years to paint that painting, but they dedicated a whole wing of the National Museum in London to this one painting that it took him 25 years to finish. Things like that made me feel like, like as a viewer of the art, does it matter to the viewer how long it took to get it made? No.
No, yeah. And like going back to energy, like think about how many hundreds of years of energy it emits after that 25 years of
Yes,
incubation, like endless.
it is. It is. One of my favorite authors, Laura Hillenbrand, she wrote this book Unbroken, which I normally pick up books and then I put them down. And this I just devoured from the beginning to the end. It was beautifully written. It took her, I think, 8 or 9 years to write this book. And just writing a little bit at a time, working with, she has a chronic condition. So, like really working around what she's able to do. And I thought that was just also so inspiring, because we often think we need to like jettison everything and quit everything, and only like we think that real artists, real writers are only doing that thing 100% of the time. And that simply isn't true. There, even somebody like Leonardo da Vinci, like he had lots of interests and lots of things. And probably a good chunk of his day was just managing everything. You don't think about all the paperwork that goes into like that.
Yeah. Well, and like some of the greatest like figure artists and stuff like that were like so inhibited by the times where you couldn't be nude and you couldn't have bodies to work from. You weren't allowed to like do that. And you'd have to do everything in secret and all of these other things. And like it was crazy. There's so many obstacles for so many of the greatest like creative things that we see now, and it's amazing
It is.
how it comes through anyways. And
It comes through anyways.
yeah.
Yeah. And I think there is that like working through those moments. I think all people who are creative have moments of being in slumber, or certain projects will be sleeping while others are active. And your energy and your work gets moved where it needs to be. And if we're gentle around that and just do little tiny tools, it's like things will ignite. I think creativity is part of our natural being. It's, tied to our sacral chakra and our low belly. It's part of the energy that gives us zest in our step. And it's the passion of life, where we derive joy and get that sense of flow and connection. And that if you put yourself in this space where you can connect to your creativity, even if it's just a tiny little spark, then it's a spark. And then it'll go from there. And when the incubation period of the work is done, when all of the gathering of the materials is done and your energy is gathered, then the work is going to be natural, because as long as you are embracing the joy and clearing any shame blocks you might have, or shame stumbling mountains, then the work is a natural byproduct of that, really that self-care, which we can help you with at Luna Holistic.
Yes. Oh my gosh, it's so true.
Well, thank you so much, Rita. It's been a delight. I could talk for 1,000 more hours with you about this topic. I love it. I've found it very, very inspiring. You inspire me a lot with all of the things that you make, your ideas, the way you see the world. So thank you for joining me today.
Thank you. I love it. I love talking about this stuff.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Be sure to like and subscribe. Give us a message to see what you are percolating on. And if you need a little bit of help getting through your creative slumber to some creative inspiration and some childlike energy, just give us a shout. We've got lots of tools, resources on our website, and we can help you with a session or two. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye. Thank you for joining us on the Luna Holistic podcast. We're so grateful that you are here. If you've got a question, we'd love to hear from you. Go to lunaholistic.com/podcast and we'll answer you in an upcoming episode. Be sure to subscribe to our show on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And also please rate, because you never know where your little 5 stars will go to shine light into somebody's heart today. So thank you very much, and we'll see you next time.